So, without further ado, I am delighted to introduce Jean Heilig and Beth Christ, who are my colleagues at the Colorado State Library. Um, and Beth Christ is our youth services consultant, and Jean Heilig is our fiscal officer for the Colorado State Library. So I am going to pull up their slides and turn it over to you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine. And I do apologize in advance because, of course, the trash truck just showed up as I'm talking to all of you. So please excuse the background noise going on. I love this image about, using courage to confront bias because it really does take courage. Oh, and Christine has painters at her house. Wonderful. Because it really does take courage to confront some of the things that we'll be talking about in today's hour-long session. So, just as long as we all know that we're not alone in this, that we have each other to support ourselves. And with that, let's go on. The first step to making better decisions in what we say and how we act is to really accept one simple idea, and that's if you have a brain, you're biased. And bias is very automatic. Most of the time, it's unconscious, and it impacts all of our, every decision that we make. It's really a natural process. Not that what you're biased about, but that you do have biases. If you think about, do you reflexively laugh at an offensive joke? Or maybe if you're in a restaurant or eating out, do you think that possibly, when you see an overweight person eating a dessert, do you think that maybe they shouldn't be doing that? Or do you treat males and females differently? For example, if you have your nephew over for a visit, do you take him to see to attend a pet a truck event? Or if you have your niece over, do you do cooking things with her? What about thinking differently about those things? If bring your niece, if you have your niece over, why not take her to a Petatrug event? Or if your nephew comes over, how about trying baking with him? Do you tend to adjust your posture or maybe your walking speed a little differently when you walk past a young male of a different race in the evenings? So think about some of these things, that you may just do reflexively without thinking much about it. So, where do these biases actually come from? There's a couple of different ways that we can acquire our biases. And the first one can be through our direct experiences. And I think the best way to talk about these experiences are with children. If you think about children, they're like little sponges. They soak up everything around them. It can be the things that people say to them, the experiences that they have, the it could be the people in their home, their parents, their older brothers and sisters, the things that are said to them, the things that happen to them. Maybe it's the neighborhoods that they grow up in. It could be their neighbors, their schools, other students in their schools. So there are a lot of things that can really affect us very directly. But then there are also vicarious experiences, and I don't say that these all end in childhood. I mean, these are things that affect us throughout our entire lives. The vicarious experiences are those that are relayed to us through the best examples I like are movies. Think about the movies that we watch, the books that we read. I think that as librarians, we're very fortunate in that we know that in order to broaden our horizons and to make us much more accepting and to understand different cultures. And we need to read more. We need to read different genres. We need to read about different cultures and different experiences, whether it be via through fiction books or nonfiction books, because we know that through education, it can really help us become more empathetic to others. But not everybody, has that mindset. And so, the people of social media is a huge one that really enters into how some of our biases can be formed as well. Or just picking up the newspaper can help us form our biases, depending on, um, you know, what slant of news reporting we watch, whether it's Fox News, whether it's CNN, or whether it's, who knows what. But those are where some of our biases do come from. So, to get us started so we're all on the same page, I thought I'd start with a few definitions so that um, we know what kind of biases we're going to be talking about through our session today. Now, we've already talked a little bit about what bias is. It's an inclination or a prejudice for or against one person or a group, whether they're intentional or unintentional. And they're the attitudes and the stereotypes that affect our decisions. And I read somewhere that there are over 175 cognitive biases. That's a lot. There are two different types of biases. They're explicit or implicit. And the first one are explicit biases. These are the ones that we're perfectly aware of. We know how we feel, and we often don't mind voicing our opinions about these biases. Now, these biases lead into macroaggressions, and macroaggressions are often micro assaults. They're the intentional discriminatory actions or assault to one's identity. They're really deliberate with intent to hurt, oppress, or discriminate, such as racial slurs, denying housing or jobs. Some people are explicitly racist, sexist, classist, and or homophobic, and they really don't care, and they don't care who knows it. And micro assaults lead into discrimination, which is treating a person differently from others based solely or primarily on a person's membership in a social group, and also to prejudice, an attitude directed towards people because they're members of a specific social group. So that's that explicit line. And what we're really going to be focusing on today are more the implicit biases. And those are the biases that we're really not aware of. They're the unconscious ideas that we have about others, the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions. They're the ones that just kind of lie below the surface that we really don't realize that we have. And these many times can lead to microaggressions. And microaggressions are often defined as the everyday, subtle, oftentimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups. The difference between microaggressions and overt discrimination or macroaggressions is that people who commit microaggressions probably aren't even aware that they're actually doing it. It's really important to understand that a lot of times people who engage in microaggressions won't believe that what they said was racist or sexist or even homophobic. And so really calling them out as being a racist or a sexist or a homophobe would really make them very defensive and make them unable to even recognize what their impact was. We're all human beings who are prone to mistakes, and we're all human beings who might commit these microaggressions. And it's not necessarily that you're a bad person if you commit a microaggression, but rather that you need to be more aware of your biases and impact on people. We all need to commit to working on these things in order to create a more harmonious society. If you think about some of the examples of microaggressions, do any of you watch The Big Bang Theory? I'll tell you what, if you watch one of those episodes, you'll see that it's filled with microaggressions, especially when one of the lead characters, Howard, starts talking to his Indian friend, Rajesh. He's always throwing microaggressions at him, and what's kind of sad is that we laugh and we think it's funny. And, it's clearly it's not funny. If you think about some of the other examples, when somebody makes a comment to somebody else saying, you speak good English, or saying something is retarded, um, imitating, if somebody imitates accents, or to say something like, she was asking for it, or to say something, that's so gay, or can I touch your hair? You know, it, Idioms are a huge form of microaggressions. And I put up this book because I just got this book and it's really fascinating. It's called On the Offensive. And I bring it up because I think it would be a good addition to anybody's library collection. If not, if not purchasing it for yourself. It's in paperback now, so it's really not that expensive. But it talks about the history of idioms. Where did they start? How did they start, especially specific ones? And about how language morphs and changes over time, and the meanings of words will change over time, and how something at one point in time wasn't really offensive, but now in today's language is very offensive. And so it's just really an intriguing look at how things will morph and change over time. So let's watch a quick video, and Christine will take us through that process.
Okay, so we're going to watch a video that's just about 4 minutes long. We have a couple more that we're going to watch today as well that are shorter. Adobe Connect can get a little bit difficult with videos because it's trying to protect copyright, so we can't play the video within Adobe Connect. So you can either click on the screen, or I just posted the link to the video in the chat. And what we're going to have you do is click on the link. It'll open in a new window. You'll go watch the video. And then when you come back, in the kind of middle of there's a menu up at the top of the screen and there's a hand. When you come back, I'm just going to ask everybody to raise their hand so that we will know who is back. So we're going to have you click on the link, watch the video, and raise your hand when you get back.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine. I really like that video because it shows so many different examples of the whole confronting bias situation. It looks at what it feels like to have somebody use a microaggression towards you, and then what it feels like to have somebody correct you when you've used a microaggression, and also what recommendations they have for people to learn how to become educated to not use microaggressions. So it's kind of multi faceted. So after watching that, this is only if you feel safe. What if you want to write in the chat box? What microaggressions have you witnessed, experienced, or participated in? We had, several that were mentioned in the video itself, but what other ones have you had people say to you? You don't sound black. Yes. We've heard that one before. And also, you don't look Jewish. Yes. Tiana, yeah, yeah, you can combine that with the second one. Yeah, very articulate. Yes. Yes, that's true. If don't take this wrong, or I don't mean anything by this. Yes, I've heard that before. Oh, geez, you look nice for a trans man. Great. Yeah, these are all such, sad examples of microaggressions in everyday life. I really appreciate you sharing with us. Oh, the education thing. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing. I appreciate it. You know, why are we doing this? Well, of course, there are many reasons why we're doing this, but I think most importantly is that if you're on the receiving end of a microaggression, there are some dire consequences of that, some long-term effects to the person who is constantly having to deal with these microaggressions, every day, 24/7. And that's really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make, all of us become more aware of the effect that we're having on others. And some of these effects can be, biological, physiological stress. It can weaken the immune system. It can cause anxiety, depression, and other mental disorders. It can be a cause of low confidence. It's somebody telling you the same thing over and over and over again. You start to question yourself. And of course, it's going to create low confidence and feelings of helplessness. So, that's what the importance of what our work is all about. And with this, I'm going to turn this over to Beth Christ. And thank you, Beth.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And at this point, we're going to transition to talking about some strategies on how you can address microaggressions. And I think this quote is really important to start with. It's from author Marianne Radmacher. And there may well be times when you consider addressing a microaggression, but decide not to for any variety of reasons. And that's okay. And part of that is the situation, right? Microaggressions can happen in a really wide range of situations. For instance, one-on-one or group conversations, in-person and online group meetings. Social media is a huge place for microaggressions to occur. It can pop up in emails, certainly popular culture. And another big difference is they can happen in the presence of those most impacted and also when those most impacted aren't there. And so depending on these and other factors, that can determine how you can respond in each situation. So just keep that in mind as we go through these potential strategies that you can consider. So the first situation we're going to look at is if you yourself have committed a microaggression. So the first step to this is just accepting that you have bias. It's what Jean was saying before, and that great quote, if you have a brain, you have bias. I am biased. We all have bias, and that's okay. Bias is a human condition. It's not a personal flaw. And so the important part, again, as Jean pointed out before, is to acknowledge it and continue working on it, learning about what statements and actions are offensive to others, and work on avoiding making microaggressions in the future. And all of this understanding itself takes courage, right? It's not easy to say, yeah, I said something that was really offensive to someone today. But that is the first step. And it does take courage. And then if you have committed a microaggression, breathe, acknowledge that you may have guilt and shame and let that go. Again, realize that this is something you need to work on in the future. And then the next step is to really listen to anyone you've offended. If you commit a microaggression and realize it right away, you can first apologize, say you think you might have offended someone, but you'd really like to hear from those that it impacted, instead of just assuming that you know what they've experienced. If someone you've offended brings it up to you first, really listen deeply to understand what impact you've caused them, what harm you've caused them. And then once you understand, apologize and take responsibility for committing the microaggression. Don't make it about yourself. Don't try to avoid getting offensive. That is sometimes my inclination, right? It's like, oh no, I'm not a bad person. I didn't mean it that way. But it's not about you. It's about this. It's about the harm that you've caused. And certainly don't try to brush it off. Oh no, that was just an offhanded comment. It's fine. Own up to it. And really thank the person sincerely for trusting you to bring this up with you. You know, it's difficult. And say that you will really do better going forward. And sometimes too, an inclination can be to avoid certain people. You're like, oh, I'm around these people, I might offend someone, so I'm just going to avoid the situation, or I'm just not going to say anything. That actually in itself is a microaggression. So realize that you may make mistakes and be willing to apologize if you do. So with that, we're going to watch another video. This is a shorter video, and this is a great example of how you can address a microaggression that you realize you committed against someone. So with that, I will let Christine explain how to do this again.
So this one is just about a minute long. It's just a quick example, so you can either click on the link on the slide or in chat. And once again, we'll just have you guys raise your hands when you come back.
And thank you for going through the slight inconvenience here of the videos in this webinar platform. We appreciate it. We think they're really, really valuable to this particular session, so that's why we included them in here. So we appreciate your cooperation and patience with them. So I'm curious to get your feedback on how this man handled this situation, and if you can think of any other ways that he might have handled it or others around him might have handled it. I see some people typing. Thank you. Oh, so he might have been faster to realize an approach to apologize. Yep. So a little delay. Kelly asks, in that situation, should you assume what pronouns they use? And that's a great question. And that's, I think, why he asked. Indeed. Oh, the chat's going by fast. Let's see. Yeah, it's great he asked for the pronouns. It would have been better to do that at the beginning, but he did realize, and he went back to ask. Yeah, so Elizabeth suggests that the person introducing Aaron should have given the pronouns at the get-go, as well as using them for the man when introducing himself. Absolutely. So that's a great modeling technique. Great point. And I also thought of one, if, you know, there's usually that introductory email that goes out when a new person is coming in. And so if you could include it in there as well, include the pronouns in that introductory email, so everyone knows before the employee perhaps even starts work there. That might be another way to head off the situation up front. Great, Dylan found the video helpful. I did too. I thought it was a good way to handle it. Jeff says, yes, just use someone's name. That is always a solution for this situation. Use a name until you know the pronouns. Yep. Oh, and Christine adds about the clip showing how simple an apology can be. He was brief. he took responsibility. He admitted that he made this microaggression and apologized, and then they moved it forward. So yeah, it was a good example. There are things that perhaps could be improved on the situation. So thank you for your discussion of that. So now we're going to turn to looking at addressing situations in which you encounter other people making microaggressions. And so there are some similarities and differences in how to address a microaggression that's directed at you and those that are directed at other people. So we're going to start by looking at the similarities in the situation. So first up is to consider whether you want to address the microaggression at all. For a host of reasons, you may not wish to. You could ask yourself when confronted with this situation, what is your relationship with the person that made the microaggression? Have you heard that person make a similar microaggression previously? Can you address this without escalating the situation? How would it make you feel to have this discussion right now? Always give yourself permission to let it go if it feels unsafe or unwise to you. And that's going to depend on the situation. Each situation is going to be different, but always give yourself the grace to let it go. If you do decide to address the situation, assume goodwill. As we've said before, many people who make the offensive remark don't even realize they're doing it. It's out of ignorance. And because they don't intend any harm, they often assume no harm has been done. That said, however, intent never supersedes the impact. So the focus always should be on the impact, not the intent of the speaker. So that might be a reason why you want to address it. One option is to consider addressing the person who made the microaggression privately. This might make the conversation a bit easier. However, there may be times when having a witness and supporters present might create a better situation for you. So again, that is your call in the situation at the moment. You may also consider waiting until a little later to bring it up with the microaggressor. It might give you time to collect your thoughts and emotions, to figure out how to phrase what you want to say. On the other hand, don't wait too long, because the memory of it should be fresh in the microaggressor's mind. So a little bit of delay is okay, but don't wait too long either. A great best practice is to make the interaction a teachable moment rather than shaming, accusing, or criticizing the microaggressor. Start sentences with I rather than you. For instance, say that I was offended by what you said, instead of saying you're a racist. The goal of this interaction certainly is up to you, but one goal possibly is to change their future behavior, not to express your anger or to shame anyone. And that can help make it, again, that teachable moment, that addressing without criticizing. If possible, don't escalate the situation. You can take it from bad to worse with an angry tone or with that shaming really quick. And if you do decide to use a direct approach, keep it brief, like in that last example we saw. And there's no need to lecture, go through a long history of why the microaggression is hurtful. Keep it brief, move on. Another technique is to address a microaggression by asking questions that will cause the microaggressor to break through stereotypes and really see what it is they're saying on their own. So we have a couple of examples. If you're in a job interview setting and an interview says that a female candidate was aggressive, ask, what exactly did she say or do to make the interviewer come to that conclusion? If a colleague remarks that a coworker of color is really articulate, ask why that's surprising. or simply ask, what did you mean by that? Or did I understand that right? That can really, it's kind of a coaching method to get the microaggressor to realize on their own the issue here. Another option is to suggest other ways of phrasing or acting in the future. You can even point the offender to resources to learn more about the topic on their own. And if it helps you, you might want to wait to address the situation and write a script for yourself before bringing it up with a microaggressor. Putting it in writing is another option, and this might be the best option to take if it's in a workplace situation and you want to document that you've addressed this with this person, especially if it's a repeat. So definitely consider that option. With that, we're going to watch another short video. So once again, a quick summary from Christine, and she posted the link in the chat.
Yep, this one is also just about a minute long, another great example. So once again, just click on the link and raise your hand when you get back.
Again, thank you for your patience with the videos in this platform. We appreciate it. So similar to the other video, would love your feedback on it. How do you think the situation was addressed? Do you think anything could be done differently? One thing I'll mention is that this is a great example of what Jane was talking about earlier with this terms in the English language that are so embedded that we may not even realize that what we're saying is offensive. So we really need to step back and look at this situation. So I see people starting to respond. Kelly says it was handled very well. It wasn't confrontational. Yes, it's a great example of that. It is that teachable moment. Very brief, and then they move forward. Also, the recipient took it really well as a teachable moment. So that was also a good response. Not defensive. Oh, Christine points out it is modeling the behavior you want to see. Jenna asks, why would it have been confrontational? Indeed, particularly in this situation, it may not have been, but it could have escalated. So there's always that chance. Oh, Elizabeth mentions the person included themselves as having learned about the word. Putting them on an even playing field. That's a great point. Yes, expressing, I too have used this term before and didn't realize it. So that way you're saying, yes, I have used this microaggression myself, and now I've heard from someone else that it is actually offensive. So yeah, great point. Great points, all of these. One thing I like about that particular video is that this workplace has established a culture of openness in addressing bias and microaggressions right up front. And that makes these situations a lot easier if there is that culture established. That's hard to do, but you can see how smoothly this went, how smoothly it could go in an ideal world, right? So I like that example as well. Jeff says they didn't call out the other person, just revealed their own position, which shared information but didn't call out anyone. Right, it wasn't accusing or shaming. Great point. So thank you, everyone. we're going to move along to how you can use courage to address a microaggression against other people, so not yourself. One important point is to address the situation in terms of how it impacted you. Don't try to speak for anyone else or assume you know how others felt in that moment. Again, use those I terms. I was offended by what you said or what you did. Even if it's against someone else, you can still talk or still respond how it affected you. If you do try to speak for someone else, they may not be your words to say. And you do want to address this. You may feel strongly about addressing the situation, but again, put it in terms of how it impacted you. There are some indirect approaches you can take as well that can be effective. So here are just a few. A coworker's good ideas continually get passed over in meetings, or maybe someone else takes credit for those ideas. The next time that happens and this person brings up a great idea, jump right in. Be sure you're the first person to speak and say, that's a great idea. And it builds on the other idea you brought up at the meeting last week. So there's an indirect way, and you're sort of intervening and bringing up the fact that you've noticed this person has that idea that keeps getting passed over. Another example might be pointing out that a female colleague in the group is an expert in all things MBA when another coworker asks only the men in the room who's leading in the playoffs. Or if there's a staff member in their 20s, if staff members in their 20s are continually given tech and social media tasks instead of older staff who have more experience in those areas, publicly praise an older colleague for helping you out recently with a complex tech problem. So again, some indirect ways that really can be actually effective in addressing the situation and making others see perhaps that they have misspoken. If you're in a situation where another bystander speaks out first, in a situation where there's microaggression committed, support them. Say, you know, that offended me as well. Another option is to later on talk with the person or people that were the targets of the microaggression to show your support. Just say, you know, that situation was really uncomfortable, and you know, I'm here for you. And then the last bullet point here is really important. You need to, excuse me, you need to continue to educate yourself on the experiences of marginalized groups without making their members responsible for your learning. So do your own research, do your own learning, your own observing, read, attend. I mean, you're already attending this session, so that's great, and do more like that. All right, we're going to watch yet another. Actually, let's go ahead and skip the next video in the interest of time. So there's another similar short video. Do you have any comments about how else you might address a microaggression that you've seen against others before we move on? Have you been in this situation yourself? I too often let these situations go. And I feel guilty about it. So after doing these sessions with Jean on bias, I'm really trying to do better, but it's hard. And so sometimes taking small steps and the realization and the trying, and maybe you take an indirect approach first if you feel more comfortable with that. But yes, I know it's hard. I haven't done a lot of things that I should do to address these situations in the past. Noemi suggests asking for further clarification about the comment, and that is a great way to respond. Just say, what did you mean by that? Did I understand you correctly? So thank you. That's a great suggestion. And I see more people typing. Oh, Bethany mentions pronouns used in welcome emails. Great. Excellent. And so, right, that's a method of circumventing the situation to begin with, right? Which I didn't put in here, so I'm going to add that. How you can just make the situation ahead of time. So, Christine says, when we avoid responding because we feel uncomfortable. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to be okay with being uncomfortable. You're absolutely right. And Christine, if you could pop the link to the other video in here, because that is, people are interested. So you can watch it. You can pop it up now and do it later. Tiana says it's very difficult for BIPOC to address certain situations, especially if they're the target. Yes, because you're often considered the aggressor, so to speak, or, oh, she's whining again about that little thing. Yeah, absolutely. So we need allies. We all, I being white, I need to be an ally, and I do need to speak up as well. It's not all on you. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. I have all the privileges except for being male, and so I need to do a far better job than I do at being an ally. So thank you for that. So Christine did put the link to the other video. Here it is that we're skipping. So thank you for that. You can watch it later. I'm sorry, we're running a little short on time. It is a little slower when we're doing this particular method of watching videos. And so here, that's a great lead into this. How you can address a microaggression against you. So definitely when it happens, allow yourself to experience whatever emotions you're feeling. They are all completely valid, and you need to let yourself experience that. You also, of course, have to practice self-care. Sometimes, as we just had an excellent example from Tiana, thank you. Sometimes it's more challenging to address the situation in the moment than to let it go unaddressed. And so always either choose to address the behavior or not. Give yourself permission to do either, whichever feels better for you at the time. Explain to the offender up front that this conversation might get uncomfortable, but it's important because they made you uncomfortable. And this is something that they have to learn. Also, we've talked about this several times already, model appropriate behavior in your response. So if someone asks you, where are you from? You can respond with, well, I'm from Grand Junction, but if you mean what is my heritage, it's Japanese. So there you're modeling for them what is really the proper approach here. I'm trying to keep up with the chat. I see Jean is jumping in here, so I will go ahead. We have one last video to watch. This one's really short. So once again, if you can go watch this super short video and then come back, and then we'll wrap up. It does address the hair touching issue. Again, quick, what thoughts did you have on this video? How could this situation be addressed differently? How have you perhaps addressed it differently yourself? and I'm saying, sorry, I'm just catching up on the conversation about pronouns with patrons, which is a great one. I love the idea of putting it on your badges. They should perhaps be more visible. Yeah, larger, more visible badges. Jean says, I totally agree with that. Great. I love all this conversation. I'm so sad we're running out of time. It is just about time. If you need to go, that's fine. Jean and I will be here to answer any questions, but I will let Christine do her quick closing. And then, like I said, if you're able to stay on, this is an amazing conversation.
So we do want to, one, thank everybody for joining us today and watching the video clips and participating in conversations. We've had some really great, excuse me, information shared. And I saw a question about slides. Yeah, the slides, the archive, and links to the videos will all be shared. It'll be posted on the Libraries Learn website, which I will post in the chat in just a moment. We do have a survey that I would love to have people take. Let us know what you thought about today's session, what you liked, what you didn't like, what we could have done better. Once again, we are always learning and growing. You can click on the link either on the slide or in chat. And then if you want to be able to access the archive, once again, it'll be available in just, I don't know, about half an hour maybe after today's session at the URL, which I'm also trying to place in chat. Talking and posting are not my strong suits. And then if people do have time to stay on and continue the conversation with Jean Heilig and Beth, we are more than welcome to stay on a little bit longer, and we can make that part of the archive as well. So Beth, I will hand it back over to you guys if you want to try to address some.
Great, thank you everyone. And if you do need to go, totally understandable. Thank you for coming. We do hope you found this session to be valuable. In the meantime, Jean and I will try to catch up here on the chat. So it sounds like some of you have some frustrations with your management, not addressing situations, which is really frustrating. Jen asks also, what is the appropriate way to ask personal questions without offending the person?
You know, and one thing, Dylan, if you're still on, what you could do is simply come up with your own badge. I would be horrified if you came up with a really tasteful pronoun badge that you could wear that was prominently displayed, and you could probably get some of your coworkers to wear it too. I would be horrified to think that management would make you take it off. You know, sometimes we have to be the change we want to see. And, you know, it's worth a try. It's worth a try.
Thank you, Jean. And this is a great question here that Jen had about how can you ask personal questions without offending people? And that's a hard one, right? Does anyone have any ideas?
Should we be asking those kind of questions, though, if we might offend somebody?
Yeah.
You know, I think it really depends on the situation and what's the information we're seeking and why are we seeking it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Dylan has a great point.
It would depend entirely on the question. I think, you know, it can, if you're curious about, you know, someone's ancestry, you know, or their culture, I think that there are appropriate ways to ask those questions without saying, you know, and where are you from? But show that curiosity and why you want to know, like, oh my gosh, I want to, you know, I want to learn about whatever. But, you know, asking, you know, are you pregnant is probably not a good idea. So I think it depends on the.
Yeah. And I think Dylan has a great suggestion here. Asking the person if they'd be more comfortable with a personal question. So, right. And Dylan, then there's some, Tiana and Dylan also follow up with, well, do you really need to know? Perhaps you should just not ask. So, Tiana, right, exactly. So once people get to know you a little better, the conversation just flows, and then people are willing to share more. But if they're strangers, or that that staff person that just started yesterday at work, do they really need to know all that information? So Noemi, that's good. Asking the person, is there anything you would like me to know? That's a good approach. Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. It looks like we have a few people just joining us. Sometimes we get the time zone issue here. It did start at noon Mountain time, so it just ended. But this session will be archived, and the slides and archive will be available for you to watch. So sorry if you missed it. Thank you. Are there any more questions or anything we missed? Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the chat when we're presenting. Curry, I'm sorry about that.
That is possibly me copying and pasting incorrectly. I'm so sorry, Curry. I am posting the archive on the Libraries Learn website, which is on the slide that you're seeing, and I apologize, Curry.
Well, thank you for coming, everyone, and we hope you found the session or will find the session to be useful if you watch it later.
Well, thanks all, and I hope you have the rest. Sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.